podcast number 2 of the day. Too much content. Conan once again here. Conan.
Hello, Joe.
And Ronan Mullen. Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Ian Madigan is on the way to talk Leinster against Munster and Ulster's win against Connacht as well. Not the bonanza at Croke Park we were all hoping for. The scene was set. 14 minutes went by and it was game over. Just not ideal for an encounter like that, but that's the way it went. So Ian Madigan is on the way. I was at the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre last night. Survived my NDA for the last couple of weeks and spoke to Johnny Sexton about his new book. And it was really lovely. Yeah. The love in the room for the man was off the charts. I've seen some standing ovations in my time, but he walked out to a standing ovation.
Really?
Oh, he really did. And it was, there was something very sweet about it. We were doing a sound check before we started, and it's a big venue. High. Yeah. And he asked Michael McLaughlin of Penguin, so are you closing off the top tier or the top 2 tiers, or what's the shape of this thing?
Yeah.
And Michael sort of looked at him twice and said, no, it's sold out. It's sold out. Like it sold out weeks ago. Yeah. He's like, whoa, kind of a moment. So it was good because I had asked him, you know, he's done his fair share of media, and I think he's probably endured rather than enjoyed the publicity trail. And I said, could we record this and play it out? It'd obviously be great. And he thought about it, in fairness to him, but then he decided no. He was like, I just want the freedom to just cut loose and do me. Not that it was like a behind closed doors thing. I mean, it was a public forum and can be reported as such. Yeah. But he was just in terms of just the feel, and I might want to say things to people in the crowd or whatever. So do you mind if we don't do that? And I said, no problem, of course. But then I got a deeper sense of why he might be in that kind of frame of mind. Because one of the first things I did was I just read out the results from a personality test that he had done at Leinster towards the end of his career. And there was advice in the personality test about how not to handle Johnny based on his personality. So it said things like, do not try and control the conversation with Johnny. Do not challenge Johnny's ideas. And do not wait for or expect praise from Johnny. So I read that out to him, and obviously crowd are kind of laughing. Yeah. And I thought, well, it's going to make my job a lot of fun this evening. And it was pretty much like it was your first answer or second. And he just turned to the crowd and said, those tests are complete bullshit, by the way. And I thought, okay, it's going to be that kind of a night. So it went from there.
Did that affect you? Did you loosen up a little bit more?
I guess I followed his lead a little bit, yeah. But it wasn't, he didn't say anything that was outrageous or wrong. It was just, you know, he talked like himself. He used a bit of language. He kind of was relaxed. And I guess that made for a much better night for the people there. So it made sense not to sacrifice their experience just for Indo sport, which is fair enough. But it was good. It was good. So kind of quasi bits and bobs edition here of things going on. We've recorded with Gary Breen and Damien Delaney about all things Republic of Ireland earlier on. That should be in your podcast feed as we speak. We referenced Lee Carsley and just more so the off the pitch stuff as opposed to on the pitch, which is not going brilliantly for him. So, like, for instance, I alluded to it in the chat with the guys, but just to put some meat in the bone, he was asked at full time on the pitchside interview about his candidacy, and he said, this job deserves a world-class coach who has won trophies, and I'm still on the path to doing that. So in the press conference, we heard what you said on the TV. You're ruling yourself out then. His answer, that would be the wrong assessment. And this has prompted a fair degree of ridicule in certain quarters. For instance, Ian Ladyman in the Mail. Lee Carsley's inability to give a straight answer about his England future is now farcical. That's the mood over there. It's International Week. There are a lot of hours to fill. Talk Sport's got to talk about something. Yeah. So this is now kind of the main talking point. This is ridiculous. And yeah, it's kind of tricky for him. I can sort of see their point. I mean, they're fairly contradictory statements within an hour of each other.
Yeah, but why do they care so much? I mean, you did say it's International Week. They've got a lot of hours to fill, a lot of column inches to fill, and it seems like his biggest crime here is not giving them enough of a lightning rod. If he had said, I want the job, then it would have been easier for them to say, this guy's not up to the job. But because he's non-committal, it's left them in this sort of limbo. Because I saw Oliver Holt's piece where he's talking about oh, now the FAI or the FA are left in this limbo scenario where they have no succession plan. The FA have had no succession plan. The idea that they've been this well-drilled machine. I mean, Gareth Southgate came in after Sam Allardyce got one game in charge. It wasn't like this genius idea that they were taking a youth manager up and that was going to be the way that the FA continued. It was Sam Allardyce. They went to that after the Iceland debacle, and because that didn't work out, they then gave Gareth Southgate, who, by the way, also wasn't sure if he wanted the job because he was doing a good job of the underage setup, and he thought maybe this is the place for me. So there was a bit of trying to charm Gareth Southgate into taking that job almost as well, and he grew into it. So I don't know. I know Gary talks about it on the podcast as well, but I hate that this is that you have to perform in this press conference to be a good England manager. I mean, I think there's a lot of arrogance to that, really.
Yeah, the party line is Carsey might have a chance because England like to hire an FA man, but only the right type of FA man.
Yeah.
They want a stately, front of house kind of person, and that was Gareth Southgate, and the tactics and the actual football side of it is secondary. That's my perception of it anyway. And it's almost as if they've been pulling their punches with Gareth Southgate for so long that they're waiting for the first opportunity to have a go at somebody. Because it's only in latter months that they've actually turned on Southgate even a little bit. And obviously, it's hard to, on the surface of it, it's hard to rail against two major finals and a quarter-final defeat to France. That's fine, but you don't need to be an in-depth football fan to realise there's a lot more beneath the surface there, and he possibly has underachieved with these players. Yeah, and not to delve too far beyond the Carsley point, but some of the names that are being floated, Thomas Tuchel most recently, he's not going to get the best out of the attacking player that for all his qualities, you kind of know how Thomas Tuchel likes to set up his teams, and I don't think he'll be playing Cole Palmer as a number 6, put it that way.
Roy Keane was asked on ITV, who should they get? And he said, Pep. Thanks.
Yeah.
Go for the best. Pep's contract is up in the summer. Pep has been over on Italian television of all places, and he was asked, are you leaving City? He said, leaving City, not true. I haven't decided yet. There's kind of increased speculation he might, given Tiki Begiristain, his brother-in-arms, is leaving the club. So English press are taking 2 and 2 there and saying Pep is a possibility. He does really want to manage, it seems, international football. He's talked about it a lot. Really wants to manage at a World Cup and the European Championships. And for political reasons, the sense is that Spain is not on the agenda for him. So maybe I could, stranger things, I suppose, than Pep in England. God, they'd be good then.
Yeah.
Oh, I just hope that doesn't happen.
The greatest international side of all time then. So in terms of anything else going on, there's an interesting story in The Telegraph about the rugby concussion lawsuit, which I'll come to in a second. But I did see, Conan, on Saturday night, Maherfeld and Newbridge were playing in the Derry football semi-final. Mm-hmm. The consensus being on Twitter, social media, was that the first half alone here will guarantee the new rule changes sail through Congress. This is the final nail in the coffin.
It seemed very well timed. I remember talking to Conor McKeown before one of the Not the Monday panels, and it got raised then. And I assume RTE wanted to show Slough Neil and Glenn Mahara, who were in the other semi-final,
on the Sunday.
But I think Derry wanted to show that on their own streaming service. So I just don't know why RTE didn't go to a different county then and pick a different game, because when I saw they were showing Newbridge Maherfeld, I knew the kind of game we were going to get. You have Newbridge here haven't been to a final since 1991, and Maherfeld, they're a very well seasoned team, but they would play a bit more conservatively, and they've had some great success. Again, a club who sort of broke through the mould, and they've done that in an era of Slough Neil and Glen, and they've been to 3 of the last 5 finals, so they would say they've had success doing it. But I knew that this game should not be televised for the world to see, and it was 1-1 to not 3 at half time. But yeah, and it's not even that, it's just
well, it's sort of that.
Yeah, that is a big part of it. But so many of these games, it's like, to go back to a boxing analogy, you're just waiting until both fighters are running out of time and need to get some points on the board, and they start swinging punches at each other then, because the first few rounds, the first 50 minutes, it feels, of club football matches are just shadow boxing.
There is that trend a lot in GA now, isn't there? That you only need to watch the last 10 or 15.
100%.
That's the game.
Yeah, watch the last 10, and in this game, watch the last minute. And as Ronan and I alluded to, you know, the miskicked point effort will eventually come. It'll drop into the square, and then we'll see a bit of action, and that was the winning of this match.
And the Revolution is televised this weekend coming, isn't it?
Yeah, Friday and Saturday. Okay. It's brilliantly timed for Jim Gavin.
You were watching Saudi Arabian boxing, naturally. Where else is there boxing?
Yeah, you're giving me my little 2 minutes soliloquy here.
I'm giving you about a minute. I've very little. The threshold for this is low. This better be good. Start with the best stuff.
I'm trying not to like belittle the Saudi Arabian element of it, because it is not great as a sports watching entity. That goes without saying. More qualified people than me can talk about that. But arguably more cringeworthy on the night was the preconceived face-off between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr., where Neymar was the peace broker for some reason in the middle of the ring. So just Google those three names and just you'll be bewildered by what you see before you. So that's...
I might actually do that.
So Chris Eubank was fighting on the undercard.
Don't. I did it after you sent it.
Yeah, it's preempting a fight, and it's just so forced. And like, given what, like, there's so much like scandal and intrigue around those two, it should sell itself. So they actually don't need this faux hatred.
Why am I not interested in this pair?
Well, this could be a separate boxing podcast. We haven't got to this point yet.
You've only given me a minute, Joe.
But Conor Benn, never has someone's profile been so out of kilter with what they've actually achieved in the ring. He's done nothing like as a fighter. He's most well known for an adverse drug finding, which has basically meant he hasn't fought in the UK since the first Chris Eubank fight was supposed to happen. And as you might recall, that happened on fight week. Like, the weigh-ins were going ahead as normal, and then the British Boxing Board of Control were ultimately like, this can't go ahead. Thank God. Yeah, but since then, there's been a lot of like, he's always in the headlines, but he hasn't actually done much. So this fight probably will happen. It probably will do huge numbers at the gate, probably like Tottenham Hotspur Stadium or something. Like, there is enough intrigue around it. The merit and boxing credentials of the two. I always had a soft spot for Chris Eubank Jr. because much like his dad, he's kind of a warrior in the ring. But Conor Benn, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. So we'll see. But anyway, that was kind of an aside. So they were on the undercard. Yeah, it's kind of... this is why I probably need more than 2 minutes.
The Oscar music's playing here.
There was a lot of... There was just so much...
We're done.
I don't know. Does someone want to like give me a ring and I'll talk to you about it? I'll do a Twitter Spaces and 4 people will join.
I just don't know if Ben, Eubank Jr. and Neymar. I don't... I feel
Come
the way...
on.
I feel the way is down after that.
It's going in the podcast headline. No, so basically they were all over there for this jamboree. It was an undisputed title fight between Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol, who are like the creme de la creme, two of the best boxers of all time, and a slugger. Beterbiev has knocked out every opponent he's ever fought. Bivol is a slickster, like a really accomplished technician, and they meshed quite well. It wasn't a barn burner, but it never was going to be because they're too intelligent to get drawn into a slugfest. But it was an excellent fight, and actually for the first time in his career, Beterbiev won on points. There was some contention around the scoring and that kind of thing. But the Saudi element of it is, this is the kind of fight that wouldn't have happened without the Saudi Arabian influence, because neither guy is a household attraction.
Yeah.
This fight there wouldn't have been enough money at the gate for these two to fight each other. The risk wouldn't have been worth the reward, whereas Saudi were happy to put the money on the table.
And for boxing fans, it's a fight of great substance and a
That's
great
the kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So it is, and it was on Sky box office, it was on TNT box office, it was on DAZN box office, you know, this kind of stuff. So it's kind of...
You're softening on the Saudis. It's almost what they want.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say I've been sports washed. I think the closest I ever got to being sports washed was the World Cup final when Messi was doing this thing, and you're like, you couldn't help but get lost in that, and then you realise how
icky
this is wrong.
Just to mention, so Will Green, not Will Greenwood, Will Green, because I saw the headline first and I thought, my God, Will Green at Wasps for a lot of the Warren Gatland success years prop. Joined Leinster in 05, retired in 07, business career now. So he's done a big sit-down interview with The Telegraph, and he's critical of the legal firm Rylands Garth, who are one of the main proponents of this mass claim against World Rugby and Welsh Rugby and various associations. So he was suffering migraines and Rylands Garth offered him testing free of charge, and so he took that opportunity. And he was diagnosed with early onset dementia in 2022, and he claims from that point on things were just not ideal. He said, like, within 24 hours, 48 hours, they're on to him saying, well, are you joining the class action? And a lot of pressure to join the class action. And he went and got an independent exam, and that suggested there were no signs of early dementia. And what ensued was a legal dispute with Rylands Garth about the whole situation, and even the cost of the medical expenses, and then the legal costs for the subsequent case, and all kind of very stressful for him. And he's wondering if was this a common occurrence, and he's telling his story. So that's kind of the big rugby story over in the UK at the moment. It's quite a dense story, but he certainly came away having thought he had early onset dementia to not having it, and then in kind of a legal dispute with the firm who he felt were quite pushy in terms of getting him into the class action. So that story's just broken in the last while on the Telegraph. There are about 295 claimants in this class action, and at least 30, 40 of them estimated to be part of the Rylands banner. So I don't know what the repercussions of that will be. This thing was always going to get messy in lots of different ways, and so that story is doing the rounds at the moment. Only so much we can say about it. So that's on the Telegraph today. Let's push on. Events at Croke Park and Ravenhill. Let's talk to Ian Madigan. Let's turn to the weekend's rugby at Croke Park. It was practically a sellout, 80,468 to be exact, who watched Leinster beat Munster by 26 points to 12. Swiftly followed in Belfast by 9-try bonanza between Ulster and Connacht, where eventually Ulster ran out 32 points to 27 winners for second home win of the season after their little foray down to South Africa, which was slightly less enjoyable. Happy to say Ian Madigan is with us. Great to have you on. You're very welcome to Indo Sport.
Thanks very much, Joe. Pleasure to be on.
So let's start with Croke Park then. Leinster 26, Munster 12, record URC attendance. Leinster scored 3 tries in 14 minutes. And I'll be honest, I was sitting there at home thinking, for God's sake.
So was I. It's the reality is after 15 minutes, the contest was over. It changes the complexion of the game. You're looking at the duels going into the match, Casey, Gibson Park, Froley, Crowley, very quickly it changes because the pressure comes up in a way for both teams, whether you're 21-0 down or 21-0 up. It affects a true contest as opposed to, let's say, we're looking to measure Froley and Crowley. How are they managing the game? It's very different when you're chasing a 21-point deficit or you're protecting a 21-point lead. And you could see large parts of the second half, it really petered out as a contest. Now, look, Munster can clutch at some of the successes, to win the second half is definitely a positive when, at 15 minutes in, you're thinking, could this be 40, 50 points? It had that feel to it. So, yeah, it was a tough game to really take a huge amount from, like, who's the starting Irish out half. For me, it's still Crowley. He was, and I actually thought in a team that where the pack struggled, he still challenged the line well. He made a couple of half breaks, but attacking against that Leinster defence, which I know we're going to dive into in greater detail, it is particularly difficult. If you get it wrong, you get severely punished.
Yes. I suppose one of the reasons we were all looking forward to this game, not least the Croke Park factor and the sellout factor, was the growing belief that the rivalry is back, that the gap is closing. Is it really?
I think the reality is it's not closing. You look back at the semi-final that Munster won 2 years ago to then go on and win the league. That definitely helped the rivalry. And, Leinster supporters were quick to say, oh, well, it was, Leinster's B team. For me, that didn't matter. It was a semi-final. Munster turned up on the day, played better and deserved to win, went on to win the league. And, you can also clutch and say, well, Munster have won more trophies than Leinster have over the last 3 years. But there's other ways to measure success. And, while Leinster haven't got over the line in Europe, they've had consistently home fixtures in the last 16, the last quarter, the quarterfinal, the semi-final, made the final. They haven't got over the line. But the impact of those positive seasons year on year from a financial perspective is huge. And you can see that with the signings that Leinster have been able to make with the likes of Snyman and Barrett coming in, and the depth of that Leinster squad and the quality of it through the 42, 43 players. We just simply don't see the same quality with the Munster squad. And that's largely down to back-to-back successes of getting those home fixtures, because they've such a positive impact on revenue for the teams.
Yeah. Because I know, well, look, I take your point. I'm sure Munster fans can absolutely say, well, look, we won that semi-final. It's a semi-final, and that's that. Doesn't matter what team you put out. I sort of think it does, really. Like, there is I wouldn't go so far as to say there's an asterisk beside that game, but I mean, it's definitely the second sentence. Yes, Munster beat Leinster in semi-final, but, and there is a but. And I suppose when you see the evidence of Saturday, a few Munster injuries notwithstanding, I think it just was a statement and just a little reminder, and I suspect that was in Leinster's mind to just say, everybody can write down, there's a sizable gap here, it's not going anywhere. And I suspect for Munster that's kind of a blow, really. They'll feel that, and that will be almost in the ether the next time they play, for instance. Some of
the interesting stats on that, Joe, like, Munster missed less tackles, they conceded less penalties, they had more line breaks, more offloads, and they had more possession.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the only stat that really matters, well, there's two stats that matters. What was the game points that were handed out? It was 5-0 to Leinster. And what was the scoreboard? 26-12. And then the other interesting stat that I pulled from some of the articles during the week, pre-2009, which is, we all look back on and say it was the turning point in the kind of Leinster-Munster rivalry. Pre that game, it was 36 wins for Munster, 34 for Leinster, 5 draws. Since that game, it's been 28 wins for Leinster and 9 wins for Munster. So, you can look at that and say, well, for every home game Leinster have, they're winning all of them, and they're probably winning 50% of them when they're going down to Thomond Park.
So elaborate then on the Munster had, I think it was double the number of defenders beaten, actually, and they did more offloads as well, 14 offloads to Leinster's 5, and they had more line breaks, about double the number of line breaks as well. Leinster's scramble defence was certainly caught the eye. There was a very memorable moment where Tom Farrell burst through the middle in a position where Bernard Jackman on TV said, well, 9 times out of 10 when you make a break like that in that part of the field, it leads to a try, but it didn't. Graham Roundtree's talking about Munster not being clinical enough. I'm sure it's a bit from column A and a bit from column B. But with those stats, why didn't Munster manage to do more?
I think part of it is the stats are always very skewed when a team goes significantly ahead early on in a game, because you're 21 points down, you've got to play. So I'm sure Munster would have gone into that game with, a clear kick strategy. Let's play the game in the right areas, apply pressure to Leinster, force them to make mistakes. When they make mistakes, we'll capitalise. When you go 21-0 down and, the famous, the best laid plans are great until the first shot is fired, and once the first shot is fired, you have to, adapt your plans. And Munster certainly had to do that. And full credit to them, they actually played some really good rugby from around 15 minutes into the first half through to pretty much the end of the first half. They looked really good, but the pressure's off there. Can they do it if it's, a draw game or within a score of a game? The reality is for the game at the weekend, it was 14 points between the two teams for 65 minutes. So it's not really a true contest.
And on Leinster's defence, if we tease that out a touch then, so Munster have these moments and they're throwing a little bit of caution to the wind given the scoreboard. I thought it was two things striking at full time. Caelan Doris, amongst others, saying this is our second year under Nina Barr. We're really getting to grips with this thing. It's starting to happen. Donica O'Callaghan, watching on the punditry, he said, I wouldn't be so sure just yet. I think the Munster attack was flat, and I think that Leinster defence is there to be picked at. So talk to us about Nina Barr year 2.
Nina Barr year 2 is a big part of that. And like going through some of the stats from last season, like Leinster were 13 out of the 16 teams in the URC for tackle success, which is a very poor stat. You're mixing with the likes of Dragons, Zebra, on the low end of the table for tackle success. But when you couple that stat with the stat of Leinster are the team that received the least amount of gain line success against them, that is what gives you the real insight into how Leinster are defending. They're getting off the line so aggressively that when they get it right, it is devastating because they're tackling the team, the opponent so far behind the gain line, and then they're so aggressive in their counter rucking that even if the team is able to hold on to the ball, it's 3, 4, 5, 6 second rucks, and then that's given the Leinster forward pack more time to get set. They then get lined up and typically smash the opposition again. And it's typically followed by, receiving a kick and a counter-attack opportunity for Leinster. So I think with the Leinster defensive system and talking about year two, like it's knowing when to get off the line and when to get off the line really hard and how to be accurate. And I know Owen Redden spoke about it last week, that you're talking about like shooters in defence, and Gary Ringrose would be probably the one that we'd see doing it most for Leinster and Ireland. And there was plenty of times last year where people would say, oh, Gary's defending on his own. And Owen was making the point that it's really the defenders inside and outside him that need to be up there with them. So if they do jink late, they're able to make the tackle there. And I think that's probably what we're seeing from Leinster already this season, is that the players around the likes of Gary and Osborne are actually getting up to their level of defending and are creating such a strong defensive line high up the field. And Munster, in fairness to them, like, they get it back to a 2-score game at 26-12. They have a line out on the 10-meter line in the Leinster half. And you're thinking, if they can get another score here, they could definitely make Leinster sweat. And we've seen, over the last couple of seasons, when you do make Leinster sweat in the last 20 minutes, they can succumb to that pressure. And that's exactly where you got to take them. But that line out, they throw it off the top. Murray doesn't catch it clean. The first tackle is in the middle of the field on the halfway line. So straight away off the line out, they've lost 10 meters. Second phase, Crowley tries to go wide, throws a kind of long loopy pass out to McCarthy on the left. They catch them another kind of 6-7 meters behind the new gain line. So they're now 17 meters behind. Leinster have them exactly where they want them, right on the touchline. That's where Leinster love to trap teams, because they counter ruck so hard on the touchline.
Yeah.
They slow that ruck ball down. They then smash Munster behind the gain line again. So you've lost 25 meters in 3 phases. Same the following phase, they catch them again behind the gain line and force the turnover. Like, that for me was Leinster kind of showing, look, you've got yourselves back into the game, but we're flexing our muscles again.
So it's very interesting. I mean, and as ever with Leinster, the proof will be in the pudding, and that's always 6, 7, 8, 9 months away. That's how we almost have to talk about them across the season, because you take the weekend and you have to say, well, that's just excellent. But to tease out the defensive point for a moment, to play devil's advocate, because I don't know what I think, but if you take Loftus in the semi-final and that loss to the Bulls as almost the poster child of when that defence goes wrong, it really goes wrong, whereby with quick passes getting out wide early or kicks out wide, Leinster were picked apart quite badly. So I take your point absolutely, that the defence, as we saw it against Munster, when it's really working, it's devastating. It's a weapon. It's aggressive defending. And that's great. And I'm going to put a stat in this, which isn't the stat, but it'll help me make the point. So it is devastating 90% of the time. But what about the argument you could have a slightly less devastating form of defence, which will be effective 98% of the time? And so I'm hearing what you're saying about those brilliant moments where it really works. But with defence, if the other team are making line breaks and they're beating defenders and you're relying on your scramble D and everyone's talking about how good your scramble D was afterwards, then maybe your defence wasn't so good in the first place.
Interesting way of looking at it. I think Leinster's philosophy is that when they get it right, they're going to catch you 10, 15 meters behind the gain line. When they get it wrong, while it mightn't look great on TV because you're looking at missed tackles, ultimately have the team got over the gain line? Maybe the missed tackle might come 12 meters behind the gain line. Leinster scrambles so hard that the team, maybe they do get over the gain line, and Munster did plenty of times at the weekend. But Leinster's scramble was so good that they're able to get set and defend them up on the following phase. And I think when you go 21-0 up or 14-0 up in a game, rugby, it does provide the opposition with a chance to get back into it because you've got the restart. You're typically going to get a set piece in the opposition's half. And the momentum of a game will always swing. But like when you go 14-0 or 21-0 up, what's really important is that when the opposition do get their bit of momentum, that you've got to make it really hard for them to score. And that's what Leinster did really well at the weekend.
Okay.
Like Munster were hammering at their line. They put together really good passages of attack, but Leinster kept just about holding them out. And look, full credit to Munster. Eventually, they did get over the line from a good set piece line out. But you can be guaranteed that the Munster players are heading back over the halfway line, saying to themselves, that was bloody tough. And I think that we're going to have to do that 3-4 times in a game. They're going to be doubting themselves.
Okay. Very interesting. We'll watch it develop across the season. So let's elaborate then on Frawley and Crowley. You touched on them at the start of the conversation. All important without halves. You'll know this, I'm sure, painfully in some days. It's an unfair comparison when one number 10 is an armchair ride and the other doesn't. So compare in that context.
Yeah, it is. If you're defending off, if you're attacking off front foot ball, you've got more time on the ball. You've got more time to make your decisions before you get your hands on the ball. You're going to have more options when you're in possession. Whereas if you're going backwards, your options are very quickly getting shut down. It's going to be coming into your head. Should I be, cutting my cloth and kicking the ball here when, both Frawley and Crowley, they want to play a running game and they're both very good at it. I was impressed with how Crowley got himself back into the game, and there was a few times where he got soft shoulders, and had there been better support flooding through, he could have been able to get his offloading game going. Frawley, like he makes stuff look very easy. Like that try that Keenan gets, it's just a very slick Leinster attack. The good pass from Gibson Park. Osborne takes the ball in possession. Takes the perfect amount of time out of it, delivers a lovely pass to Frawley, who's in the perfect position, turns the corner, fixes the defender, and delivers the pass at the right time to Keenan. And I think we've seen already from the first 4 games of Leinster this season, I've been very impressed with how their attack has improved. We were very critical, myself included, last year of the quality of Leinster's attack, and in particular, I thought the passing was quite poor. It was nothing as fluid as was what we've come to expect from Leinster over the years. But the passing now it's much crisper. It's out in front. There's a big focus. It's not these kind of long loopy passes. It's very much 5, 7, 8 meter passes that are really accurate. That when you're playing on the front foot, you've got to defend every attacking player in the Leinster backline, and then you're mixing in the likes of Doris and Conan within that. It is really, really difficult to defend that. Sometimes it does look quite simple, but it's very, very effective.
And do you have any great qualms with Leinster not scoring in the second half? Do you just put that down to the circumstances, or what happened there?
I was a bit disappointed that they didn't fully kind of twist the knife in when they had that opportunity in front of 80-odd thousand. In their defense, they did get a bit disjointed in, like, Clarkson playing in the back row, Porter in the back row. So you lose that bit of cohesion that they had. I think when you go, I'd say the talk at halftime would have been, let's not let Munster back into this, for it got back to, let's say it ended up really opening up and it ended up being, 35, 27, and Munster come away with 2 bonus points. Leo certainly wouldn't have wanted that. He'll get real satisfaction out of Munster coming away with no league points. But there's still plenty of work-ons there for Leinster, and I think we're seeing them trying to build through the season. Obviously, they've started with the full house of 20 points from 20, but they're quite measured in their attack. They're not looking to overplay in the middle of the field. There's plenty of times where I'm looking, going, right, we're good to attack here, but they're being patient. They'll keep playing the pressure kick game and nearly waiting for the perfect opportunity, similar to what we're coming accustomed to, when we're watching the Premier League soccer. Like you're going, well, you pull the trigger here and take a shot, but they're waiting and they're waiting. But you could see in the first 15 minutes, that patience, they get themselves into the perfect position. And then when they do attack, it's with a very, very sharp sword.
Yes, because there was a touch of a theme of running out of ideas a little bit in attack last year, but goodness me, first 20 minutes obviously on Saturday, that wasn't the case. You like the look of Jamie Osborne at 22 years of age at 12. Good game.
Yeah, really like him. I thought he was brilliant in South Africa. I was definitely a bit critical of throwing him in there, and I didn't think it was the right time to do it. But they were obviously seeing enough from him in training, and he certainly stepped up and delivered in probably the toughest place to do it. South Africa are the best team in the world, or very close to the best alongside ourselves, and to be playing against them away from home at full back when they've one of the best kicking games in the world. He was brilliant in the air. He's just look, he's a brilliant athlete. He's strong. He kicks the ball as well as anyone in the world. That left foot boot he has is phenomenal. The length and the accuracy that he has with it. We saw, in the first few games he was playing fullback, and then, he moves into 12. He looks very comfortable defensively. He doesn't get himself in bad positions. He typically lets the 10 lead the line, which gives him read time. And then he's already built up a good relationship with Ringrose. He knows that Gary's going to shoot at any opportunity, and he's got to be able to protect Gary there, either by staying high on his inside, or if he does go really aggressive, being able to manage that scramble defense in behind him. But yeah, it's the simple things that he makes look really easy, like that try that Keenan goes over for. That looks like a really simple thing to do, but it's not. You're under maximum pressure there. This defender's shooting out of the line, trying to affect your timing. I've seen him do it with lots of variation, either catch pass, maybe he'll take one step, maybe he'll take two steps. He's always looking for the pass, but because he's really strong, he can make his decision late. And if he does decide to hold on to the ball, he's big enough and strong enough to be able to ride the contact, and the ball nearly always comes back, which is quite often something that takes younger players a bit longer to figure out, and when they're looking to ball play and they do get caught in possession, quite often they get turned over, but that's not the case with him.
No, it's really, it's an incredible couple of months in his career, to say the very least. So if the contest never really came to life for obvious reasons and the result was never in doubt, so the occasion kind of suffered, it's probably worth remarking on the fact that nonetheless there was like an intensity to the physicality. So we had injuries all over the pitch, all sorts across the board, and then 5 HIAs thrown in. And I think Jeremy Loughman's eye closing by the second and bleeding and turning blue in front of us is the memory that endures a little bit. On the HIA situation, I thought Graham Roundtree's comments on the mount guards were very encouraging, because I anticipated maybe some coaches would quibble with them and feel that, God, they're a bit excessive, and maybe privately they are saying that. But he was asked about the HIAs, and I should state, I went to look. I don't know how many of the 5 HIAs have been attributed to the mouth guards and the sensors going off, and how many were just based on the visuals. But nonetheless, he said the idea of these mouth guards with the sensors, it's a sound idea. I'm very confident with all the HIA return to play protocols. I'm really confident in them. There was a huge amount of them today, but that's how the game is, and we'll manage that. I think it's us as coaches, clubs, to get on with it, manage it, deal with it. So yeah, there's no real question for you here, aside from just letting the listeners know that this was kind of Roundtree's response, and it's a good one, because there probably are grumblings behind the scenes that the threshold for these mouth guards is a little on the soft side, and we're having too many HIAs on certain games, and there's a worry about that. And I know the people behind them are trying to find the right pitch. When they were first introduced for last year's Six Nations, the sense was there could be between 1 and 4 extra HIAs per game than normal. Obviously 4 sounds like a lot. I don't think it was OTT from memory, but 5's not nothing either in the game. You do just see the brutality of rugby, and some of these knees to heads when fellas are tackling low brings home the fact that they're unavoidable. We can talk about tackle height, but you saw knees going into head, and it just is a natural aspect to the game, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the data will get better over time. You know, they're relatively new, this technology. Maybe the threshold is a small bit on the low side. It'll be interesting to see if certain players, you know, pass that threshold more than others because maybe they hit harder. And while it mightn't necessarily be head contact directly, just the sheer velocity going through your body can flare them up. I certainly think it's worthwhile talking about should there be additional subs if these gum shields go off, like very quickly, like at 15, 20 minutes, you're thinking, oh God, are we going to have uncontested scrums here? Because, you know, you'd lost two Munster hookers. Lockman looked like he was going to go off as well. So definitely one that I'd consider in the front row, that if there is additional HIAs, should you be looking at having you know, an additional loose head and hooker on the bench. But that's going to open up a full can of worms of you know, the bomb squad and how many forwards can you have on the bench then. But it is very disruptive when you're going off, and for a player as well. Like when you feel like you let's say you've made a hit and you feel totally fine. You're in the heat of battle, and your adrenaline's coursing through the veins, and you're going off, and you're walking the line and trying to remember plate, wheel, tire. You know, it certainly would sap the adrenaline out of your system as you're trying to pass this concussion test, knowing that you're totally fine. And there's also been cases as well where players come off. They're so kind of amped up that like they struggle to focus for the concussion tests, and they end up failing them, even though there isn't a concussion there. But it all comes back to, though, like the safety of the game. And that's why Roundtree's comments are really positive. He knows that rugby has a big problem to solve, and hopefully the gum shields will help with that. From an actual tackling perspective, and like where are these concussions coming from? You know, we're trying to drive the tackle height lower, but as you said there, it brings into, you know, knees are more at play. And, you know, typically concussions actually come from colliding with two players from your own team and in a tackle. And then the big one that I want to see kind of refereed harder is players using their elbows in contact. You know, and while Lockman's one is actually a poor example in the sense that Orgy's going for an offload, and it's very much an accidental elbow to the face. There's plenty of times where I've seen elbows being flared out in contact, and you look at the rule changes that we've seen over the years, like the seatbelt tackle. Like there was very few concussions from seatbelt tackles over the years. It was very much, let's, you know, rule this tackle out of the game, and optically it's going to look better, and it looks like we're making improvements. Flaring elbows have knocked out loads of people.
Yeah, they're slightly dirty. Like
they are dirty, and there's a real skill to them.
Yeah.
You know, it's just as you're approaching contact, you know, it's very difficult to referee because the rule is if your arm is still connected to your body and the person who's tackling makes contact, that's perfectly legal. But you can actually flare your elbow out, you know, right on the correct time, and it can only be an inch or 2 inches away from your body. But that's the equivalent of being punched, but with a really hard surface into maybe the side of your head or your jaw. And that can do serious damage.
It's funny with the Lockman situation, whereby like a concussive blow is visually impossible to see in a player, whereas a more superficial one, like in Lockman's case, just looks dreadful. And clearly Roundtree and his medical staff, they're not entrusted with the PR war that the game might be fighting. But I did think there's going to be a big audience watching this, and like the close-ups of his eye are just shocking, and I could just imagine parents and all of the people who have their slight concerns with the gladiatorial aspect of the game thinking, God, that's a horrific look. And, you know, I'd say the authorities watching were like, oh, please just take him off. It looks horrific.
Yeah, no, look, it doesn't look good. And I think when you're playing in the game, you become so desensitized to seeing blood. You know, like every Tuesday and Thursday training session, you're going to see someone probably get a cut of some sort. And
I stress it's far more superficial and less serious than a concussive blow. It's just the visuals.
Yeah, but I suppose the other side to it is when when your eye starts closing over and
Yeah.
your perception is affected and your peripheral vision is affected, that's probably a good time to take someone off.
Yeah. Quick few things to hit on very, very quickly. RG Snyman's performance then. Joe McCarthy had a niggle. If Snyman plays like that routinely, I presume he'll be borderline first of the three on the team sheet.
It's a great problem to have,
Yeah.
because
You solve it for us now. Who's with him?
I think between himself and McCarthy, they're such power players. Like, if you wanted to play them off the bench and bring them on after 50 minutes, they're going to have maximum impact. And I think the way the game has gone now, and I certainly know this is true with the South African players, if you're, in the starting eight or you're part of the bomb squad, when the team's getting picked, I think we can become obsessive, and particularly in Ireland, we love talking about the starting 15.
Sure.
But if you're a loose head prop and you've a meeting with the head coach on a Monday, and the team's getting picked on a Tuesday, and he tells you, look, Stephen Kitsoff, we're going to pick you on the bench this weekend, but we're going to bring you on at 50 minutes just like we do every week with our loose head. Is he going to be disappointed with that? He's going to be a closer. He's going to be on for the end of the game. He's going to have a massive impact on the match, as opposed to playing the first 50 minutes. Whereas you compare that to 15 years ago, where the loose head would typically play 80 minutes. You're going to be absolutely devastated to be told you're on the bench, because you're thinking, 15 years ago, you think, well, I'm only going to come up with an injury here.
Yeah.
So
no, it's a fair point. It has changed. So you see Ryan with one of the other two as the more complementary partnership, do you?
Yeah, that's probably how I see it playing out. Yeah. I think Ryan, from a line out calling ability, his consistency, he's more of a workhorse second row. He gets through a huge amount of work defensively, hits a lot of attacking rucks, runs the line out particularly well, is a real leader for Leinster. And then having Orgy or with him or coming off the bench, like, what a problem to have. And I think that's obviously one of the challenges that Munster had with Orgy, was keeping him fit and like being able to rotate him and being able to rest him when he's got a niggle is probably, ironically, we'll probably see him play like 15, 20 times for Leinster injury free, and everybody scratching their head thinking why.
Yeah.
But you can also manage him slightly better, so you're not playing him because you have a deeper squad.
It's worth, for anyone who didn't see the game, he was also to the fore, as was Ryan, in disrupting Munster's line-out, which was a big aspect of the game. Just a last one at hooker. Andy Farrell loves adversity. He's got it. So Dan Sheehan, obviously the ACL in July. Ronan Kelleher, Leo Cullen said over the weekend, 4 to 6 weeks. They reckon, now if that's 6, then he might make the Australian game, which is the last week in November, but he almost certainly would say out for New Zealand on the 8th of November. Niall Scannell had the HIA, he returned. Dermot Barron, HIA, didn't return, haven't heard an update. Tom Stewart has an ankle injury, Rob Herring a calf injury. So you're left with Dave Heffernan fit, we'll presume Scannell is fit, John Andrew at Ulster is fit, but slim pickings all of a sudden rather.
Yeah, it is. And you go from, Kelleher and Sheehan, probably the best hooker combination 1-2 in the world, now being injured and certainly being unavailable for the All Blacks game. But that's a great problem to have at this time. You're in between World Cup cycles. You want to be able to test your depth, because there's going to be injuries, and there may be injuries at the World Cup, and you want to be able to see what your third and fourth choice guy is. I think that probably would have been Tom Stewart and Rob Herring. They're both injured, so we're going deep into the depth chart.
Yeah.
But I'm personally a massive fan of John Andrew. Was lucky enough to play with him for the 3 seasons I was in Ulster. Really highly thought of in the squad. Really consistent player, and I think at hooker for Ireland, you're not necessarily looking for a world beater there, because you've got so many world beaters in your team and in your pack. You just need someone to come in and do their job really well. And that's what you get with John. He's a set piece hooker. His line out throwing is up there with the very best in the world. He's a very good scrummager. He knows how to get the ball down when he's at the back of a maul. His try record for Ulster speaks for itself. And I think as well, you got to look when you're bringing someone new into the squad, especially an international team, you have a huge amount to learn from assistants' perspective. John's a really smart guy. He's the kind of guy be able to come in and fit in quickly. And
Okay.
I thought he was going to potentially get a call up during my first year in Ulster, and it's just a very, very tough position to break through in. But maybe he'll get his chance now.
Yeah, maybe. Not least against New Zealand. I mean, it's welcome to the party. So Munster will fly to South Africa now, 2 games against Stormers and Sharks. Leinster will truck on and keep doing what they're doing, you suspect. Ulster 32, Connacht 27. By far the better game. I mean, this is kind of what we were hoping for in some respects at Croke Park, whereby initially Ulster took control of the game. They were 19-5 up on the half-hour mark. Connacht, just before the break, came back to within 2 at half-time. You suspect Ulster were kicking themselves at half-time. They're level on the hour mark, 24 points apiece. Josh Murphy gets a red card for Connacht on 71 minutes at 24 points apiece, shoulder to face. And then Ulster go on and win the game. So after their defeats in South Africa, it's now 2 wins from 2 at home. And they have the Ospreys on Friday coming at home as well. So suddenly could be sitting quite nicely on 3 wins for 5. By the way, it's kind of jarring to see empty seats up in Ravenhill. Wouldn't be, I always associate Friday night sticking it on the BBC and you're getting full houses and raucous atmosphere. So for whatever reason, empty seats up there. But that was just an aside.
Yeah, I actually said the same thing to Anna when I was watching the game.
Right.
The corners and the terraces weren't as full. Hard to explain that, to be honest. I don't know. You'd like to think that the more they win at home, the more the stadium will start to fill up. But probably the last couple of seasons have been disappointing up there, and
maybe that's part of it. Yeah. Could you?
Yeah.
I'll get your thoughts on the game. Could you just set me a context for Ulster this year? So, like the kind of bullet point notes would be: well, Richie Murphy in his first full season going to find his feet. Finances not good. Departures. Young players coming through. Kind of everybody just dig in for what could be a season of transition would be the nice way of putting it. Is that kind of what we're looking at here at Ulster?
Yeah, I think a good result for Ulster is finishing in the top half of the league, which obviously secures European qualification again next year. Give themselves a run at the playoffs. We've seen certain teams gain momentum in the second half of the year, scrape in 6th, 7th, or 8th, and then suddenly you can go on a run in the playoffs. But look, the reality is that the financial situation is not good in Ulster. The depth of their squad has been greatly affected, losing the likes of Billy Burns. So they've gone into the season not fully knowing who their first choice out half is. Ultimately, Aidan Morgan's getting the first run at it with Flannery injured and being picked ahead of Doak. But he's got limited experience and is going to take a bit of time to find his feet in the league. He has got off to a good start, and the 2 home wins is what's really important. Ulster have got to focus on winning at home, and then if you can pick up 3 or 4 wins on the road, that will ensure that you make that top 8. But you can see that the depth of the squad just isn't there. Like Marty Moore is a big loss at tight head, so you're massively dependent on Tom O'Toole there. And then you look at the likes of Sheridan and Izuchukwu being on the Merging Ireland tour. That blew a hole in the second row for Ulster. And when you're playing in South Africa and you get overpowered, you don't really stand a chance of winning. And that's why they were beaten well over there. But I was impressed with Ulster at the weekend. They've got to become a team that's tough to play against. That when the opposition make a mistake, Ulster capitalise. And if you make a mistake around the middle of the field against Ulster, you give away a penalty, and they get that maul game going that they probably came away from a bit last year. But we've seen green shoots of it against Glasgow and against Connacht. That if they get into your 22, they'll typically come away with points. And you've probably the best goal kicker in the league in John Cooney there, who's still looking at the top of his game. Full credit to him. 35 now.
Yeah.
And then, look, what's exciting for Ulster when they do get back to full strength, if they can get parity in their pack, it is a very good backline. You get Hume back fit, McCluskey, Rob Balakin. I know I've spoken about him a lot, but if they can get Rob fully firing, he's as good as any winger.
Yeah.
But the attack for Ulster has been limited because they haven't quite been able to get that front football.
Fair enough. And a last one then. Connacht once again involved in cracking match away to Irish Province and don't win the game. Early signs on what kind of season they're going to have?
Yeah, I've been impressed with Connacht so far. They'll probably look back on both the Munster and Ulster game and think we could have and potentially should have won both of them. Ioanni's been a good signing, and I've been impressed with him. He's a strong guy, runs the back line well, gets his hips squared through contact, and I think as the season goes on, we'll because he can do that and do that effectively, we'll see his offloading game come into it more. But it's going to take a bit of time for players to learn off him, and when he does go for a break, being sure to flood through. But on a negative side, he'll be very disappointed. Like there's two opportunities at the end of the Munster game and Ulster game where he can get the ball deep into the opposition 22, get their maul going, and potentially win the game. And he's kicked the ball dead on both occasions. So that's something he'll be disappointed with. Look, it's a relatively easy fix. And then the other big positive is Ben Murphy. Like, what a revelation he's been. I was looking at his 4 tries on a highlight reel. Most scrum halves would be happy to have that from a career.
Yeah.
Just looks like a real out half scrum half, which is ultimately someone who gets the ball out of the breakdown really quickly, has a really high standard of pass. Looks like a really fit guy, and he's got speed. When he does make a break, he's very hard to track back and get. So like he's certainly someone who could be a bolter. The challenge for him is, defensively, we're looking for more from nines than we ever have. And then box kicking is obviously a huge part of it. I think some of his kicks at the weekend, he would have expected more from himself, but he's off to an absolute flyer so far.
Yeah.
I'm excited to follow him.
Strange moment for Dad in the stands as you score a wonderful try against my team. Both happy and heartbroken at the same time. Ian Madigan, brilliant to have you on. Thank you so much.
Cheers, Joe. Pleasure.
There you go. That was Ian Madigan talking all things rugby to us. That is us done for today. Football chat is also in your feed. My thanks to Colin. Thanks to Ronan. Joe Canning is in studio with us tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. Good luck.